Hello everyone, we're just letting everyone in. Welcome to our event today, we're really excited. Okay. Right, we'll get started. Good morning everyone and welcome to the October edition of Scotland's Community Heritage Conversations. My name is Cara and on behalf of the organising committee, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's signed up to attend today. I'll start off by saying that today we're joined by BSL interpreters, Heather and Stephen, and if you would like BSL interpretations throughout the event, then simply click on the interpreter and select PIN, and this will keep them visible at all times on your screen. And these instructions are also in the chat bar, but please do post in the chat if you need any help with this. And a huge thank you to Historic Environment Scotland for funding that directly. For those of you who haven't been able to make any of our previous events, but are regulars to Community Heritage Conversations, we're so happy that you're joining us today. For those of you who are about to experience this event for the first time, I want to welcome you and hope that you enjoy it as much as we do. In 19 days, the UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, referred to as COP'26, will commence in Glasgow. And therefore, as a committee, we felt it was long overdue to discuss the connection between community action and community heritage. Or climate action and community heritage, sorry. Today we're going to hear from an array of projects and perspectives on how the climate emergency is being observed and responded to at a community level. But before we start exploring that, we've got a few housekeeping announcements. This event is brought to you by a partnership of heritage organisations, Archaeology Scotland, Chartered Institute for Archaeologists, Councils for Scottish Archives, the Community Heritage Alliance, Historic Environment Scotland and Northlight Heritage. But what really makes the event unique is it's a platform for you to share your stories of your project and your heritage. We're still holding this event on a digital platform for now, but as we've said previously, this has allowed us to expand the event beyond the traditional annual conference. And our next event will take place on Saturday, the 13th of November, which will be an open celebration of community heritage. And tickets for that are now available for the event, so please do take a look and book on. And if you have any ideas of papers or projects that you would like to talk about, please do get in touch because it's an open celebration, so we want to hear from all of you. We're in a Zoom meeting format, which will hopefully enable you to fully participate in the chat and discussion. Please do keep your mics off unless you are speaking to hopefully ensure that we will have a smooth running order today. And after each talk, we will then have a live question and answer session, and you can use the chat bar to pose your questions or comments, which will be picked up by one of us. Please start your questions with a Q so that we can easily identify it as a question to be asked. And these instructions will again be added to the chat bar. Towards the end of the event, we're going to have a wider discussion, which again, you can take part in by posing your question via the chat bar. Or if you'd like to speak in the discussion to ask your question directly, please raise your digital hand, which can be found in the reaction section at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Or failing that, just start waving at us enthusiastically, but please do, we prefer you to use the digital hand. Today is being recorded, so please note that if you contribute to the discussion either in the open session or via the chat bar, it will be shared and publicly available in the future. Get in touch if you have any questions about this or if you've contributed and have a change of heart after the event. And I know I don't need to say this to you all, but please be kind and respectful when you ask your questions or take part in the discussion. We really want to make sure that the lovely, friendly and inclusive nature of the event continues online. We are tweeting. Our event hashtag is #CelebrateSCHC, so please do tweet away. So I think that's everything. I suggest that we get started and fingers and toes crossed, everything will go well today. So first up, we have Ewan Hislop, Head of Technical Research and Science at Historic Environment Scotland, who will be setting the scene for us today by exploring the role of community heritage in climate action. So Ewan, over to you.
Thanks, Cara. Can you hear me okay and see me okay?
Yes.
Great. I don't have any slides, so it's just me, and I'll kick off. So I'm really delighted to to be at this event. Thanks for inviting me. It's the first one of these community heritage conversations I've been to, so I'm very excited to be here. I'm delighted we've got a session to discuss climate change. And I can't wait to hear from those speaking in the programme. I'm going to stick around for the rest of the event, so really looking forward to listening and learning. I've got just 10 minutes to kick things off, and I've been asked to share some thoughts on heritage and climate change. I don't need to emphasize how climate change has come to all of our attentions in the last few years, and particularly increasingly so over the last couple of months. And of course, things are kind of moving to frenzied fever pitch now as we approach COP'26, as Cara said, taking place in just a couple of weeks, first 2 weeks of November. But it is important to note that this COP comes at a really pivotal moment. COP'26 has been described as humanity's last chance to save the planet. And more precisely, it's for nations to put in place measures to commit to the terms of the Paris Agreement. So the 197 state parties, the countries who take part in the COP, to keep the world within a 1.5 degree global warming. Right now, we're on track for something more like a 3 degree warming, with catastrophic consequences predicted to occur over the next coming decades right across the globe. And if you saw the BBC News last night, you'll have seen the English Environment Agency headline was "Adapt or Die." I mean, really, really dramatic stuff. We're going to hear a lot in the coming weeks about two major strands of climate policy and climate action: the race to zero and the race to resilience. The first of these is the urgent need to drastically reduce carbon emissions from all our activities in order to directly limit global warming. This is mitigation, in other words, to stop the causes of climate change. The race to resilience is about adaptation and the fact that even if we stopped greenhouse gas emissions tomorrow, the climate has already changed and will continue to change significantly for several decades to come. In other words, those changes are already locked into the global system due to previous and current emissions. We hear a lot about mitigation and net zero, but maybe less so about adaptation and resilience, which in the context of climate change can mean many things. It can be about engineering solutions to prevent flooding. It can be about working with nature, for example, to develop natural solutions, or using traditional land management practices that can often have additional benefits, for example, in biodiversity. It's also about building resilient communities and social and economic sustainability, including through cohesiveness. And it relates to the importance of social justice and equity in times of huge transformational changes. And this is the Just Transitions agenda that you may have heard of. So the first point I'm trying to make is that climate change is a pretty wide agenda, and it's not just about the obvious things. Climate action requires shifts in almost everything we do, and it's going to affect us all in lots of different ways. Part of my job over the last couple of years has been helping to develop a climate change programme for Historic Environment Scotland. And in 2020, we published our new climate action plan. This was based on 7 core themes that span right across everything that we do in the organisation, as well as energy and carbon management and impacts and adaptation. There's also sustainable travel, biodiversity and landscapes, sustainable tourism, circular economy, sustainable procurement, right across every part of our operation. Afterwards, I'll post a link into the chat for our climate action plan in case you're interested in exploring those themes a bit more. And we've been working in a fairly conventional way for a number of years now on mitigation and adaptation. In terms of carbon emissions, we've worked really hard to reduce energy use in our buildings and from other aspects like travel and waste. And we've undertaken adaptation to address physical impacts of climate change to our sites and to our operations like flood prevention, coastal defences, and so on. And we've made some great progress. So for example, we've seen a 31% reduction in carbon emissions over the last 5 years across the organisation. And where we've focused in on specific sites, some of our big high carbon emitters like Edinburgh Castle, we've achieved a carbon reduction levels of 46%. But that approach of looking inwards, if you like, and reducing our own emissions is just no longer enough. We need to be able to drive bigger change beyond our own doorstep. If we calculate our wider emissions, so those that we cause indirectly, if you like, it's a really dramatic picture. So, for example, the carbon emissions that result from our purchasing of goods and services in HES is in fact more than double that from energy use in our buildings. And we've got a lot of buildings. And if we include carbon emissions resulting from our external grants and investments, the activities we fund, so the carbon that results from the activities we fund right across Scotland, these together collectively make up almost 70% of our carbon emissions. And here there's a massive opportunity for us to influence carbon emissions way beyond our own boundaries. And that brings me to the second point I wanted to make, that we can all do so much more to influence behaviours beyond our own doorstep, if you like, through the wider work that we do and the interactions that we have. And it's not just about reducing carbon emissions, it's also about making adaptation actions work harder in terms of the benefits that they can deliver. For example, building resilience not only to physical heritage assets, but using that as an opportunity to deliver wider positive environmental benefits on biodiversity and social benefits through wider engagement involving communities. And this is sustainability in its widest sense. And I think here there's something really interesting around the role of heritage and culture in climate action. And that's what I want to focus on for my third point. Rather than seeing cultural heritage as a victim of climate change, how can we turn that around to make it a resource to support climate action? And one really obvious way to me is through communication and engagement. Millions of people engage with heritage in Scotland each year through visiting sites or museums, or for example, by direct participation, often local. People are fascinated by our past, and cultural heritage, it's like an anchor. It roots people to places, it roots people to each other. And secondly, heritage also gives a perspective of time. It documents change as being something that's always happened. It shows that society has always adapted, including as a result of past environmental changes. So the point I'm trying to make is that cultural heritage actually has something unique to offer. And whilst I wouldn't want to underplay the scale of the challenge that climate change brings, there is an opportunity to view that challenge in the light of past human stories and changes, and at the very least use heritage to spark awareness and discussion. This, I think, is the heart of resilience. And we also shouldn't forget the expertise that exists in our sector within heritage, as well as repositories of knowledge. It's a sector full of enthusiastic and expert communicators who engage and inspire others. I'm looking at a load of you on the screen right now. So my final point is about resilience, that heritage can have a fundamental role to play in building resilience in communities through that sense of the past and our relationship to the planet that also helps connect us to the future. And back to COP, there's something different about this COP. There's a tangible realization that something else needs to happen beyond the political agreements and the VIPs, beyond the blah, 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 if you like. We know there's overwhelming scientific evidence. We know there's technological solutions. We know there's engineering innovations, and they all have their place. But there's something that's been missing, and that's the human dimension of how to take people along. The transformational changes that are needed can't happen without people. And there's definitely a recognition now that areas such as arts, culture, and heritage are the key to unlocking that. If you want proof of that, you just need to look around what's happening at this COP. For example, there's a new Culture at COP website just launched a couple of weeks ago. It's already got a huge number of incredible events spanning a massive range of activities, things like events around poetry, food, music, exhibitions, film, volunteer. There's loads of heritage in there too. And it's really, really exciting to see this happening. And I think a great opportunity for our sector to become active and show our relevance to climate action. And I'll post a link to the Culture at the COP website into the chat too. So that's really my final point. I mean, maybe as a challenge to you to use that unique perspective and the talents that can be brought out through heritage and that ability to engage and inspire. And I don't think we can afford to let our heritage be left behind, to be seen as stuck in the past or as a victim of climate change. Rather, we need to make heritage part of the solution and a positive force to support change. Okay, I'll stop there. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your morning.
Ewan, thank you so much. I've got a felt tip pen and I've just been sort of circling keywords and points, and I really love the, I know we'll come back to this in discussion, but the idea of reframing the discussion from climate heritage being, you know, from heritage being a victim to an almost activist really is a fantastic point to make, and I can't wait to discuss that further later. But we must move on to our next paper, where Sue, hello Sue Hampstead from St. Weems Ancient Cave Society, is going to discuss Weems Cave and action stewardship resilience to climate and environmental challenges. So over to you, Sue.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen now.
We can.
Yes, good. Right. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I belong to the society that was set up to protect and preserve the Weems Caves. So I'm just here to tell you a little about what we're doing. First of all, a map for those of you who aren't familiar with the site. So these caves are situated along the Fife coast at the east end of the village of East Weems. And they're most famous for the ancient Pictish carvings that are found on the walls. So there's a greater number and variety of these carvings than in any other cave in Scotland. I've got a few examples just to give you a taste. The double disc is the most familiar Pictish symbol. You'll see it everywhere in Pictish works, and we've got lots of them at the caves. But we also have some rather more intriguing carvings that have never been pinned down to a particular time or date. This is one that ideas are very fast developing with. We now think it probably dates to the Iron Age. And there's also this boat, which used to be called the Viking boat once, but if you notice, there's no central mast. So it was probably used along the coast rather than across oceans. And it probably is a Pictish boat, but it's very difficult to date. But nevertheless, we think it's probably the oldest carving of a boat in Scotland. So these caves were formed by sea action carved out of the red carboniferous sandstone between maybe 9,000 and 4,000 years ago. The relatively high sea levels at the time were caused by the melting of the ice, probably over a kilometre thick, that covered the land during the last ice age. Since then, the land has undergone a post-glacial rebound, meaning that the caves are currently above the high tide level. So we don't get the seawater coming into the caves on a regular basis. But sea levels are now rising, of course, due to climate change. This is causing an acceleration of coastal erosion. The land in front of the caves is fast being eaten away. A couple of illustrations of this then. You're looking at Jonathan's Cave as it was in the early years of last century. You can see a wide stretch of land in front of it. A little further along there was a gasworks. It was operating from the 1850s through to the 1950s. And you can see that there must have been a lot of traffic along here. You can see the tracks on this side. Now, there's only a very small amount of land in front of this cave. This photo doesn't illustrate it really well, but I was standing back as far as I could to take it. Behind me, there was a vertical drop down to the shore. And the coastal path no longer goes any further. It runs out at Jonathan's Cave. Now you have to walk along the shore if you want to get as far as the old gasworks. My other example here is Castle Green. And right up to the 1990s, you could still drive a car from East Weems along the coastal track around the promontory and onto Castle Green here. And the Cave Society used to have an annual barbecue. Fine if you could convey all the equipment and provisions by car, but not so great if you have to carry it up and down some 90-odd steps. We no longer do the barbecue. And that's because of a couple of bad winters and a really huge storm completely demolished the path around the promontory. You can still walk around, but only if you're confident enough to walk along this sea wall. A number of attempts have been made over the years to stave off the erosion along the coast, but with limited success, mainly because it's not something that you can find a permanent fix for. You need to maintain the defences if they're to remain effective. There was a seawall built in front of East Weems, the village, in the early 2000s, and similarly at Buckhaven, the next village along. These walls are quite attractive and have succeeded in keeping floodwaters at bay, but they don't extend to the shore in front of the caves. And the reason for that is that they take a lot of taxpayers' money, which the council can justify in terms of protecting people and property, but not caves and carvings. And sadly, these walls might well have made the erosion in front of the caves worse. The walls do nothing to absorb the force of the sea, rather they just shift it along to the next unprotected bit. So what's the current state of play? Strangely, there's more land in front of Court Cave than there was a century ago. The coastal path used to run through a passageway which was actually part of the cave itself. And the shore was immediately in front of the cave. We think that changed around the 1930s. One end of the passageway was bricked up and the path rerouted outside along where the shore was previously. So where did this extra land come from? We suspect it's connected with the coal mining activity. Coal mining was a major industry in Fife for much of last century. And when you extract coal, you extract along with it a great deal of waste product. And this tended just to get dumped wherever it would go, often along the seashore. That's probably what's happened outside Court Cave. And when the passageway was closed, a new path was instituted. The sea is still a threat, of course, but not as imminent a threat here as elsewhere. It would be good to be able to reinstate the path around the promontory, not least because its absence means an awful lot of steps to climb on our guided tours. But this isn't really on our horizon at the moment. Castle Green is eroding noticeably year on year, but the caves in the cliffs are not under immediate threat. And although interesting in their own right, they don't contain any of the really ancient carvings. At Jonathan's Cave, well, there has been this rampant erosion, there is some defense in place in the form of some seriously hefty boulders. I don't know when they were placed there, but they've certainly limited the erosion for now. Although coastal erosion might be the biggest long-term threat to the caves, it's not actually what we're concentrating on at the moment. That's because vandalism is a more immediate problem. The Cave Society was founded in 1986 after a car was pushed into Jonathan's Cave and set on fire. This incident totally destroyed a whole panel of Pictish carvings. But it's what brought local people together to try and do something about it. There was an attempt back then at Jonathan's Caves to put grills on to keep the vandals out. But right from the start, the lock was repeatedly broken. And it was only about 3 months before the gate itself was broken too. It may have kept cars out, but people were and are still defacing the carvings. Now that we're able to look and tackle this properly, our plans are for grills, but rather than restrict access to the whole cave, we're looking at shielding only the sensitive bits where the carvings are situated. And we intend for the grills just to be locked overnight, which is when the damage tends to happen, leaving people free to visit during the day. We've consulted widely and, crucially, we've had overwhelming support from local people who understand the need for this. I'm not sure how much I can say officially yet, but we are a good way along the path to securing the funding. You might be thinking that this is a bit of a detour from talking about tackling climate change issues, but it seems to me that for us, this is a vital step in that direction. The grills are a very visible statement that there is something here worth protecting. There was a lot of attention given to the carvings back in the Victorian era, starting with James Young Simpson's publications in the 1860s. And there was a succession of archaeologists investigating the caves, Christian McLagan using a special stone rubbing technique she developed, John Romilly Allen surveying, measuring and cataloguing, and John Patrick's photography, and quite a bit else besides. But then the interest waned. With a few honourable exceptions, the Weems caves were ignored for much of the 20th century. It's only now that enthusiasm is again rising for what we have here. This has been furthered by the working group government in 2013 to bring all interested parties together. So there's ongoing input from Historic Environment Scotland, Five Coast and Countryside Trust, Five Council and the Weems Estate, who are the owners of the land, and especially from the Scape Trust, who have been working alongside us every step of the way. So I see these grills as symbolic of the significance attached to these caves, recognition of their worth. If we were doing nothing to protect them from the constant threat of vandalism, I doubt that many people would be noticing that there was anything worth saving from the waves, certainly nothing that would justify expensive sea defences. Once the grills are in place, we'll be able to develop the site further, adding more facilities, more interpretation, and generally improving the visitor experience. In fact, work will be taking place in November to add a new path into Court Cave, which will allow access to users of wheelchairs and mobility scooters. The more we're able to improve the experience, the more visitors will come, and the more our site will be able to contribute to the local economy. And that will all strengthen our case for this fantastic and intriguing part of our heritage to be protected against further threats that climate change will inevitably bring. Thanks for listening. I hope I've given you a flavour of the site and why we think it's so important, but also a taste of the dedication and perseverance of all the people involved with the Society over the years who have refused to let these caves be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was, I'm just amazed how you managed to fit so much work into 10 minutes. So thank you so much. It's no mean feat. Sadie, you have your hand up there. Do you want to unmic? Oh, to unmute?
Yep, I've done it. I found it. Yeah, I have a question actually for Ewan, and I'm interested to know how he's measuring carbon emissions.
Oh, thanks, Sadie. I might defer till later on in the session because we're having a session on measuring carbon emissions later on this morning from some of my colleagues who know much more about that than I do. So I'm going to dodge that if you don't mind from now.
That's absolutely fine. I was expecting it to be coming up somewhere during the course of the morning.
If there's any outstanding, if there's any outstanding questions after that session, Sadie, we can bring it up in the general discussion. Back to Sue and that fabulous paper of Weems. I think that really links with what Ewan was saying about the sort of power, in a way, of heritage, of community heritage to shine a spotlight on climate change in terms of, by your very engagement with the caves, is showing that they are such vital sites to protect. And as you say, that seems to be influencing money to be spent to help preserve them and stem off that changing coastline. Is that right to assume?
I think that's very true. Yeah, I think there are a lot of local people who really treasure what they've got there, and they can see that there is a threat, and the more we can highlight that, the better. And while the caves have such a low profile, we're not going to be able to draw attention to it. But with these grills going in, I think it's a major signal that there is something really worthwhile here. And the more visitors we attract, the more we can spread that word of the dangers of what's happening climate change-wise and the effect it's having on parts of our heritage, including the caves.
Yeah, I know that you've done a lot of digital work in the past with SCHC. So, and there's, I don't know if that website's still live, but there's a lovely website. Yeah. Is it? Right, okay. Yeah. So where you, do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, do find it online. It's called Weems Caves 4D. So if you search for that, it should take you there. Or our homepage, weemscaves.org, will take you, will give you a link through to it. But it's a result of a major scanning exercise. So we scanned the whole coastline there, used a drone to photograph over the top. So we've reproduced the shoreline with all the caves, and you can click on any of these caves and shine your virtual torch around, and you'll be able to see the carvings. So you can see how they are now, where we've got evidence from the Victorians where the carving has changed. You can compare that because you can bring up all this extra information. You can get into caves that no longer exist. There's a cave that's collapsed that happened during the First World War, but we've recreated it from all the information that was gathered by the Victorians and recreated it on the 4D website. There's lots of little extras there, you know, lots of little films to tell you about the Hansel Mundy tradition at the Well Cave, or the antiquarians who actually explored these caves and did so much to record what they found during the Victorian era.
That's fantastic. And I think going forward as well, when we're talking about highlighting how important those caves are, that digital resource is just really quite key to that, particularly engaging with audiences perhaps can't directly get to the site. You know, and got a lovely comment from here from Katie, who said, I remember coming to the caves for an RTI workshop and it was fantastic. So there you go.
Right. Yes. So we used all the RTI in the Weems Caves 4D because you can actually shine your torch on the carving, and you can, because of the RTI, you can change the direction of the light source to explore that carving, and it you know, it highlights different things as you move the light sources.
It's a magical technique, isn't it? It makes me stuns me into silence, which, as many of you know, is quite rare. So Sue, thank you so much for that talk, and I know that we're going to come back to it in the discussion because it's such a good case study of showing that sort of climate change at that local level. So thank you so much again, Sue.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move on to our next paper. So now we're going to move on to the University of Edinburgh grassroots project, where Hannah Genders-Boyd and Tanya Romankovich will talk about counting your carbon and learning from archaeology for a zero carbon future. So hi, Hannah, welcome.
Hi, thanks, good to be here. Am I right to go ahead and share my screen?
Absolutely, please do.
Start that wee presentation there. So I think we'll just do that now, share screen. Lovely, and I'm hoping everyone can see that now.
It's looking good.
Great. Brilliant. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to very quickly talk to you about a little bit of the grassroots project that I've been involved with the University of Edinburgh, which is Tanya Romankovich's project there, and how we've approached this subject of measuring carbon emissions and also more widely measuring environmental impact. This element of the project that we've been involved with is a turf building project. So the question is how to measure environmental impact and carbon emissions when building with turf. So what was the project? Well, we created a turf-built penannular structure up in Perth and Kinross. The design was inspired from a known prehistoric structure, also from that area. And this project involved a lot of collaboration. So between the University of Edinburgh, a professional turf builder, ArchaeoBuild, who's Daniel Posmer, Cymru Croft, which is the place where the actual structure was built, Historic Environment Scotland, and many others and members of the community. The actual structure was built over 6 days. But there was a lot of preparation for that beforehand with environmental surveys and assessments before we ever got on site. And this is a picture of us in the process. So you can see that the structure starting to come together there, and those layers of turf, cut turf about 4 centimeters thick, that you can then layer up on each other like a layer cake to create this strong wall. And this is about a meter thick wall. So why turf? What was this all about? Well, turf is a very traditional building material in Scotland and actually across the UK and Ireland. It's been used throughout prehistory and is found in the archaeological record, but there's a lot of confusion or it's not very well understood what the effects would have been on the landscape that people for prehistoric peoples, or what effect that would have had on communities. So there's a backward looking back at the archaeological side of things. That was an important part of this project. There was also a part of the project that was looking forward and thinking about testing turf's potential as a future sustainable building material. That's a really interesting and exciting idea, but not one that we can fully explore until we have a good understanding of the carbon emissions from it and the environmental impact of it. And you can see here, this is an image of us having a hand cut those first lot of turfs to cut out the footprint of the building. So measuring environmental impact, how do we go about doing that? Well, we worked with some independent ecologists.
Hannah, I think we've just lost your sound. Oh, what's happened? Try and come in and come back. Right. I can't hear you. I presume everyone else is having a sound problem as well. It's not. Yes. Okay. Good. Nodding heads. Good. No, that's fine. That's fine. What we might do. Just trying to mute again if it's. I know this is connecting to audio. Sorry, folks. We'll just try and get this sorted. I knew it was going too smoothly. What we might do while we try and get this sorted is we could move on to the next paper while we try and help Hannah with her sound. Does that sound like an okay idea?
That sounds like a good plan to me, Cara.
Yeah, let's do that. Hannah, you will not be left by yourself on this. We'll try and help you with the sound. But if perhaps could you unshare your screen and we'll move on to Katie Firth's talk early. If Katie, is that okay with you? Yeah.
Just checking you can hear me okay.
We can hear you, that's fine.
Okay.
So Hannah, I'm just gonna stop sharing your screen if that's okay. There we go. And we'll get that sound sorted because it was just a really interesting paper. And then we've got Katie Firth coming on slightly earlier than planned. Hi, Katie.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, hopefully, I thought being the rural one, it was bound to be my tech that would fail. So hopefully it won't. So I'll just select my PowerPoint. So good morning, everybody. I'm Katie Firth and I'm from Stromness Museum. I'm going to be talking about how you can incorporate climate change within heritage exhibitions. So for those of you who haven't been before, Stromness Museum, Stromness Museum is one of Scotland's oldest independent museums. It was founded by Orkney Natural History Society in 1837, and now it's run by a board of voluntary trustees. And I'm part of the collections development team, currently funded by Leader. I'm part-time and do lots of other things as well, like Young Archaeologists Club still. So yeah, I'm busy. But I'm doing this talk today because 2 years ago I put together an exhibition called The Living Wrecks, the Marine Life of Scapa Flow. And Stromness Museum has a natural history collection that spans lots of different disciplines, from seaweed collections to a herbarium, lots of stuffed birds and fish and shells, and lots of marine life. So really this was a subject that lent itself really well to showing off some of the museum's collection. And at the time, climate change was an integral theme of the exhibition, but it wasn't the sole reason that we put it together. So the exhibition was part of our centenary celebrations of the anniversary of the sinking of the German fleet in Scapa Flow. And if you don't know much about Scapa Flow, don't worry, I'll give you a quick run through. So at the end of the First World War, during the armistice negotiations, the German fleet was interned in Scapa Flow, and the Vice Admiral Ludwig von Reuter decided to take matters into his own hands when he thought that war was on the brink of being declared again. So he decided to sink his fleet. So on Midsummer's Day, he gave out the signal to sink the fleet, and of the 74 ships, 50 of them ended up on the seabed in Scapa Flow. And 7 of the battleships and cruisers are now major dive sites, and there are also lots of sites where the salvage took place and there still remains on the seabed. So they're very good places to visit as well. And they're now scheduled ancient monuments. But most of the divers go there to visit the impressive structures of the ships and to see their guns and that sort of thing. And often the squishy stuff gets overlooked. So that was the reasoning behind the exhibition, to really raise awareness and understanding of the effect that the wrecks have on the marine life of Scapa Flow. And I'm really indebted to Associate Professor Jo Porter, who works at Heriot-Watt University at the campus in Stromness, because it was her research that really inspired me, and she helped me understand how the wrecks really affect the marine life and have provided artificial reefs for many marine creatures to live on. And these were the exhibition display boards that you can see on screen now, and they were funded generously by Museums Galleries Scotland. And I tried to theme the exhibition on 4 main wreck sites: the SMS Karlsruhe, SMS Dresden, SMS Moltke, and also the Wildcat JV 751, which is an aircraft wreck from the Second World War. But they're all very interesting sites, and they all have their own stories associated with them. So the first exhibition case, it featured objects from our own collection, such as 2 rare fan mussels. Before I did this exhibition, I'd never even knew what a fan mussel was, but now I'm obsessed with them. So you can see there's one in a box, which you can't see, but there's another one propped up kind of in the center of the case. And they're protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. And in 2011, one of these live fan mussels was discovered near the wreck of the SMS Karlsruhe. So these mussels, along with horse mussels, which you can see on the floor of the case under the fan mussel, they're vulnerable to trawling and dredging activities. And these activities can't take place in the vicinity of the High Seas Fleet wrecks, the scheduled monument sites. And also, when you have lots of recreational divers in the water visiting these sites, you can't have fishing and trawling and dredging taking place. So the wreck sites have allowed these organisms and their habitats to thrive. And I think that's a really interesting link between cultural and natural heritage. And these horse mussel beds are one of Scottish Natural Heritage's priority marine features. So they play a really important role in their ecosystem as a biogenic reef. So they're organisms can live on other organisms. And they also play a role as a carbon sink, so they can store carbon. And I'm going to talk a bit more about blue carbon in a little minute. So the second exhibition case, it featured loaned objects, such as some fish skeletons, some sea pens, that's the stuff that looks like spaghetti, and a display from an organisation called SCHC, and a microplastics display that was loaned by a researcher from Heriot Watt. And putting this exhibition together, it just inspired me so much that I ended up becoming a SCHC volunteer, and I now snorkel around Orkney every week, and I record marine life and submit my records to SCHC, which then goes into national databases, and it's how one of the ways that Nature Scot can learn about which sites are important around the country because of this big citizen science project called SCHC, which I had never heard of before I put this exhibition together. So the exhibition highlighted the work of SCHC and also our local authority's marine environmental unit. And both of these monitor and record marine life. And the exhibition also highlighted blue carbon and introduced this theme to many people who also hadn't heard of it before. So essentially, blue carbon is about the potential that marine species have to store carbon, such as calcium carbonate in their shells or skeleton. For example, the marine algae that you can see there on the right-hand side, the pink stuff, it has a calcium carbonate skeleton. And organic features such as kelp can also store quite a lot of carbon. So that was really interesting to me to be able to highlight that to lots of people. And it's something that we now in Orkney, we have had a blue carbon audit, the world's first blue carbon audit here, which was published last year. So it's something that's becoming more widely known. So I was really keen to create an interactive exhibition. So here you can see somebody looking at these stereoscopic images in 3D, and these are called bryozoans or sea mats, and they're tiny marine creatures, and these images are magnified many times and are borrowed from the Natural History Museum. So I think it was important to offer things to do as well as things to look at. So I also had a video playing, so I put a call out to local divers and dive organizations to give me some of their videos of Scapa Flow underwater, and put together these in a sort of compilation video. And I think it was really popular. I've had people mention it even in the years since. And some of the interactives were aimed at a younger age group. So this is a kids box that me and my dad made to give kids something to do. So there was lots of things to touch and feel, and there was jigsaws of marine life and things like that. And the marine environmental unit at the council, they gave me special samples, and we made an interactive activity where people could look at them under a magnifying glass and identify the little creepy crawlies that were sampled from around Scapa Flow. And they also do invasive species monitoring. So again, that's something that can pick up changes due to climate change of new species coming into our waters. And as well as the exhibition, we had a really varied outreach program. We did an animation, which I'll try and put the link in the chat, called Animating Scapa 100, with lots of people from the community and visitors came along to help us put together an animation about the scuttling of the fleet and its impact on the marine life. We also bought an Oculus VR headset, and we had some virtual dives going on. And we had a local teenager came along and brought his much fancier VR headset to the museum to let visitors have a go of virtual dives. So that was really amazing to do. And the best thing we did, in my opinion, we got funding from Museums Gallery Scotland, again from the Festivals Fund, to do a snorkel safari. So we had about 24 people come over the course of a day and experience the marine life themselves just from the museum pier. So that was brilliant fun. So I was kind of asking myself what role the museums play in mitigating climate change and helping to sort of play their part in addressing the climate emergency. And I think that Ewan really hit the nail on the head with this. And museums and other heritage organisations, they have a role in improving the education, training, public awareness and participation and access to information on climate change. And I hope that the Living Wrecks exhibition played a little part in contributing to this a couple of years ago. So when I was preparing my talk, I had to think about what lessons I learned and what was important to me in how, how to the success of the exhibition. And I think the main lesson I came away with was the importance of partnerships. So there were lots and lots of people involved, and Stromness is a town of about 2,000 people, but we do have a university campus and several dive businesses. Orkney has a sub-aqua club, and there's lots of people who care very much about the natural world. And it's those people that were really key to this, that they were keen to share their knowledge and their expertise and passed it on to me. And I was able to then share it in the exhibition. And as I was saying before this, I knew almost nothing about the marine life of Scapa Flow. And I think working with these kind and knowledgeable people, I think this can be transferred to anywhere in Scotland and any community in Scotland, any historic site, even if it's land-based, it will have people living in the local communities nearby who have a love and enthusiasm of the natural world. And you don't have to go far to then link that to climate change. And I think Ewan also hinted at that when he was talking about biodiversity potential of sites. A lot of the exhibition was loaned objects as well. So it wasn't just relying on things that we had in the museum collection, but things that people had at home or in the cupboards at the university that they were willing to loan us. So what next for us? Well, the museum is really running with the sort of this kind of importance of our natural history collection and the historic records that go back to the 19th century for Orkney's wildlife and natural history, and how we then use that to help provide information for documenting climate change. And we're also going to be running some climate cafes just after COP26. So I really feel like the momentum is there, and we are now realizing that the museum has a role to play in addressing the climate emergency. So I think people are also quite surprised by that, because they don't necessarily think museums are about climate change, but hopefully by keeping on raising awareness, we can change that sort of stereotype of what museums are about. So I hope I've not gone over time. Didn't look at the clock, but hopefully we can have some interesting discussion after this. And here's a link to, there's an online version of the exhibition and my email address there if anybody has any questions or wants to chat about things. And yes, I hope the audio gets fixed, because I was interested in the turf building. Thank you.
Katie, thank you so much for that. That was just incredible. And I know I've got about 5 questions for you. And there's lots of comments in the chat. What we're just going to do quickly is head back to Hannah, who's a bit pushed, got a timing thing going on. So if we, Hannah, there you are. Hello. Hi.
Hello, can you hear me? I've restarted my laptop.
We can. Yes.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. Excellent. Oh, brilliant. Right, I'll just share my screen again. I'm so glad I managed to catch Katie so as well. I've just finished my master's up in Curricle, and it's really exciting to hear what's going on with that really fantastic work up there. So but yeah, so back to turf quickly. So yeah, where I just left off there was talking about measuring environmental impact sort of before we began. So we started with creating these quadrants that were surveyed to understand the grassland species present, and they're surveyed beforehand by an independent ecologist and will be surveyed
after we've built the structure, again in spring and again next year, to get a really kind of clear picture of how it's how the turf built structure has affected that grassland. Actually, what the initial results showed was that it's a fairly species poor area. So we're not affecting a very rare or diverse grassland there. And of course, as part of that, we also checked to see if there were, if we were in an area, SSSI area or anything like that, which we weren't. Of course, that kind of thing is really important to do before any kind of building project. Alongside that, we also undertook an invertebrate survey with another independent ecologist. This is an exciting one. We're yet to get the results back from it, but there's a question there about the potential for a turf building to increase biodiversity in terms of invertebrate life. So that will be what we'll monitor and measure as the project continues, but to see whether we can make a kind of a habitat creation as part of that, as part of the turf building. It's a really interesting question. This whole project was, and certainly in the build up to it, was seeking advice and sharing expertise was a really central part of what we were doing. I'm not an ecologist, so finding out what information was out there, what kind of expertise was out there, and drawing in expertise from different partners was very much the approach that we took. And certainly I think an important aspect to think about whenever you are trying to work with complex environments, as all environments are really. And then the other thing that we did in measuring environmental impact way before the beginning was thinking about replanting. So thinking already about the future of the project, we knew that this area was going to be stripped. So thinking about how we were going to replant, what we were going to replant, and the best way to prepare the soil for replanting. And part of this project, because it is a research project, will involve planting different species to see which species are able to take most quickly, because we're cutting right down to the subsoil, and which species are sort of most effective in replanting. So measuring carbon emissions, I guess this is kind of the juicy bit that we're here for in this session. Obviously, a really important part of this, essentially a construction project, is identifying sources of CO2 release in the construction process. So really the big one for us in this is the CO2 that's released when you cut soil, when you cut a soil matrix and release carbon from that. So that's the one for us to really identify and think about how to measure. The other more obvious sources would be things like tools. So you can see here in this picture, this is us hand cutting the first lot of turfs, which I can tell you was plenty of hard work. And the rest of them we used a petrol cutter for. We also needed to use a strimmer to cut the grass down and things. So identifying those sources of CO2 in the construction process, and also of course from materials. Turf itself is a very low carbon material, but we did use a gravel layer as a drainage layer, and we took that from a very local quarry on that same land. We were considering using timber from a neighbouring croft and decided against it, partly for that carbon reason. When you're using those kind of materials, there's often have been measured, and there will be data on how much carbon might be released from, say, local limestone or whatever. So that's something you can use for understanding how much carbon is released from the soil matrix. Gaining that data is a huge part of this project, and is, again, we're using partnership working to deal with that. So working with partners who will be doing things like loss and ignition testing to understand how much carbon is actually being held in the soil matrix, and from there working out how much carbon is going to be released from the cutting. A lot of this project was aiming for low carbon. We were aiming to create a low carbon structure and create a low carbon project. But it is important to say that as part of this, we did also use tools. And I was glad to kind of capture here, this is a picture of one of the crofters we were working with, breaking up the debris, the grass debris that's going to be respread on this stripped area for regrowing. And wiping his brow because it was really hard work. And we did also use things like a large digger, which we can quantify exactly how much diesel was used for that, and drove tools to site. And it's interesting to think about actually where carbon does have a place in projects, where time versus effort versus carbon should be considered, and how you're going to quantify it and how you're going to measure it if that is the case. And I think that's a valid part of any construction work. Another thing that we are thinking about, so what I've just talked about is all the ways that we're emitting carbon as part of this process and measuring that emission, is maybe the more positive side of it is carbon sequestering. So again, something we've considered from the start of this project is that sort of end of life, or maybe an element of circularity in this project. As we have released carbon as we've cut the soil, but we'll be regrowing on that stripped area, and that will be carbon sequester as grass regrows, probably in about a 20 to 25 year cycle to kind of re-sequester that carbon. So a lot of what we have kind of come to, I say this is a research project, it's kind of a work in progress and a development, and we've been very happy to develop our ideas as we've learned along the way. And more coming to this idea of balance, so balancing CO2 emissions with this idea of biodiversity, with the potential for natural capital, with the outreach or whatever else can be gained from this structure that we've created. So there, I think, is something important to think about there in how we balance. Okay, we might have more carbon release at the start, and then we're going to sequester at the end, and we might be actually increasing biodiversity here, and we might have an increase in natural capital. So trying to sort of see the big picture in a project is definitely something that we're bringing in. And don't try this at home, kids. Just finally a little notion to finish on. While we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of like exactly how sustainable or otherwise this material is, it is more sustainable than, for example, concrete, and that's a universal truth. So this structure that we created, I'll show you some more pretty pictures of it in just a moment, was actually a very quick build. I'd say we did it over 6 days with a relatively small team, and it is a really interesting traditional material to work with. So I guess once we've worked out a methodology for identifying its sustainability potential and its carbon potential, then we can be thinking more about what uses turf might have in our own back gardens, in our own structures that we want to create, or walls that we want to create, rather than steel and timber fencing, for example, in our gardens. So that's another little thought to maybe finish this on, and that we'll be drawing into our project as we go through. And there you can see a nice image of us having more or less finished off that structure there. There'll be a final turf capping layer with the grass growing on top, and that will be another opportunity for carbon sequester there, and maybe even some wildflowers growing in the centre. So another potential for carbon sequester over the life cycle of this building. So I think any questions are going to have to go to Tanya Rankovic, who's also here, which is great, because I'm going to have to run away. But thank you so much for your patience and for hearing that. That was great.
Thank you so much, and it's credit to you, you're still making jokes after having so many sound issues, so thank you. We do have a few questions. I don't know if you're going to stay for 5 minutes, are you heading off, and that's absolutely fine if you need to run.
Yeah, I could take a question, and then I'll let Tanya take over from there. Brilliant.
Okay. We've got over next, we've got about 5 minutes now just for a few questions for both Katie and Hannah. So we've got a question here from Julie. By removing turf from a particular area, does that increase the risk of flooding in this area?
So that's something we are aware of. If you are in an area that does have the potential to flood, then yes, we were taking turf on a slope, and have been quite careful about taking it from a fairly thin area to reduce that flood risk. Also, for our actual building, we've made sure that there's a good
a significant gravel layer to stop the building itself being affected. But yeah, certainly that is something that you would need to consider in any given area. Obviously, reducing turf isn't as significant for flood risk as removing something like trees, but it will have an effect. So that is definitely something to consider if you're using turf.
Brilliant. And I think your project as well, one of the questions or potential data gaps I think we as a committee have been talking about is the process of archaeology in this. So some of the processes you were talking about, carbon emissions while doing archaeology, and the potentially what you need to do to balance that out at the end of the process. And I think that's something as a profession or as a sector we've not really looked at in terms of the actual process of doing archaeology. We look at driving to site or how much paper we might use, but we don't look at the actual how much soil we move and things like that. And I think that's what I'm going to be watching this project with very closely. Have we got any more questions for Katie and Hannah? Because I'm going to jump in. I've got a sort of question, point really for Katie about the fan muscle, the fabulous fan muscle, and how I know I'm going to share a blog spot after during the break. But Joanne Porter, the blog spot that she wrote about finding the fan muscle and then working with you to find that in your collections, the fact the very rare fan muscle has been in Scapa Flow for nearly 100 years or so. And for me, that emphasised the importance of, again, different sectors working together to look at these issues rather than working in silos. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, Jo, she's just such an inspiration. She actually discovered the live one on a Sea Search dive, so on a dive for the Citizen Science Project. So when she told me about it, and when I learned about horse mussel beds and how long lived some of these species are, I started to think some of them might have been old enough to actually have been there at the time that the German fleet was sunk, and then they've ended up in the museum. So that's kind of how the animation started, because I thought that's a brilliant story. But yeah, if it hadn't been for her, I think I had maybe overlooked the fact that these objects were in the collection. I mean, one of them isn't in an accessible collection, it's in locked away in a cabinet, but it's now been digitized and it is going to be available online. So I think we're moving forward in the right direction, and going to be able to share more of our natural history collections that are in cupboards that you can't see, because they're going to be digitized and put on our website very soon. So yeah, I think Jo it was amazing. She was an amazing person to meet, and then she has a very good knowledge of not only the functioning science of marine ecology, but she also has knowledge of museums, and she has contacts in Cardiff Museum and the Natural History Museum in London, who she's put me in touch with, who I can now call on for advice on things like how cardboard boxes affect the conservation of the shells in our collection, that kind of thing.
Amazing. Rosie, you have your hand up, and we've got a question in the comments as well, but Rosie first.
Well, more than happy for the question from John to go first, John Large, and it's a question for Katie. How difficult was it creating these partnerships? And then if we have time, I've got a quick question for Katie and also for Hannah, but only if we have time, of course.
Well, I don't think it was very difficult, because I think also sometimes connections can lead you on to others. So one of my family friends, she had done some work experience at the Marine Services, and when I was talking to her about the exhibition, she said, oh, they used to have some stuff in jars, so why don't you contact them? It's like, because I knew I wanted to put the exhibition together, but a lot of people said, well, a lot of the stuff's like squishy and it won't work in an exhibition. So it was kind of asking around. So I suppose it wasn't difficult because I talk a lot and I talk to a lot of people. So then those people then say, oh, why don't you ask so and so? and they might be able to help you. And the same with the dive club. There was a lady at the dive club called Penny Martin who was brilliant in sharing and giving me lots of her images and her videos and putting me in touch with other people in the dive club who might have videos of something else. So in answer to your question, I don't think it was difficult. I think just speaking to people and making contacts with all their contacts was what happened.
Well, you're pretty fabulous at network, like making those contacts, having worked with you, Katie, over the years. So, but I hope to come back to that theme, I think, in the discussion. I think Rosie's going to save her question for the discussion towards the end of the event, if that's okay, because we're running a bit over time. So we're going to have a quick tea break now, if we could try and be back here for 11:20. Thank you so much for our speakers. I know some speakers are going to have to shoot off, but thank you so much for our speakers this morning. It's been fabulous, and I can't wait to pick up these themes in the discussion later on. But otherwise, go get a cuppa, and we'll meet you back here at 11:20. Thank you. A chance to just get. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance just to get yourself a cuppa. We're now moving to the next part of our session, something slightly different. We've done one workshop before with our online conversations, but we're joined today by several members of the Historic Environment Scotland Climate Change team who are going to lead us through an interactive workshop looking at how we can potentially take climate action. So I'm going to hand over to Katie Carter here. Hi, Katie.
Hello.
Over to you.
Perfect. Just sharing my screen and off we go. Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. So you've got myself, I'm Katie Carter, the Circular Economy Project Officer at Historic Environment Scotland, and Louise for the next 40 minutes. And I'm going to do a quick introduction and then hand over to Louise, who's going to take you through a workshop. And we're going to be looking at how you yourself can take climate action. And I'm also going to give a quick overview about how you might think about starting to measure your own carbon impact. So I'm just going to quickly take you back to basics and have a little think about, go right back to what is climate change in the first place. So as Ewan mentioned earlier, climate change, it does refer to those long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. But what we're talking about today is really those accelerated changes that we've seen recently. And those accelerated changes have been caused primarily by the burning of fossil fuels, so coal, oil and gas, by the humans since like the Industrial Revolution, so 1800s, as well as human-induced land use change as well. So these activities, they've been releasing large amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and causing our planet to heat up, trapping in the sun's heat. And the thing with rising temperatures is that it has these knock-on effects to our Earth system. It causes intense droughts, water scarcity, severe fires, rising sea levels, catastrophic storms, and declining biodiversity. So lots of scary things there. And some of those things we're actually already seeing today. So Scotland's own climate projections, which you can see here on my slide, they're on the same trajectory. So we're looking at hotter and drier summers with greater extremes, wetter, warmer winters with more intense rainfall events, and continued sea level rise and continued instances of coastal erosion as well. However, and of course, we're seeing some of these changes already happening today, and some of these changes are already locked in as well by the emissions that we've already released, so we can't change that. But it is clear to know that, and I really hope there is some hope out there, we can actually change the extent of and the extremity to how our climate changes by reducing greenhouse gas emissions right now. But we have to take action now, and we have to take it urgently. But what is the role of heritage in all this? So, I mean, heritage is at the front line of climate change. It is at risk from the impacts of climate change. And there is a handy guide that you can see on the Historic Environment Scotland website, a guide to climate change impacts if you want to hear more about that. But I think what I'd like you to take away from today, and something that Ewan was mentioning as well, is most importantly, heritage can be a key driver for change. It really has the potential to bring people together with a shared sense of place and identities. And Also, it can inspire us. So we've actually got a millennia of human knowledge we can tap into. We can look at tried and tested activities that have already happened. And when we need to rethink how our society is set up, so move us away from those carbon intensive and polluting activities, can we look back at the past and be inspired by some of the things that we used to do and maybe revive some of those things or use those to inspire new ways for us to do things? So there's lots of good stuff we can do. So moving on to what is climate action. So I've just put these under 3 headings. The first being mitigation. So ending our contribution to climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And Scotland's target for this is net zero emissions by 2045, but in the city, so Edinburgh and Glasgow, that's net zero by 2030. And net zero just really means reducing those emissions to the absolute minimum first, and then any leftover emissions, those are balanced with activities that remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. What I would say is reducing emissions is challenging, but it does come with some new and exciting opportunities as well. Opportunities to build new and resilient business models that are no longer dependent on fossil fuels and the volatile supply of those fuels, and we've been seeing the fuel shortages recently. So potentially, something that we might see more often in the future. And it also does bring some new local economic opportunities for people and communities. So there's some good things that can come from that. Next is adaptation, so preparing for climate change and the risks that climate change brings and building resilience to this. And lastly, sustainability and justice. And actually any activity that you do under mitigation adaptation should consider these things. So you should take into account the social, economic and environmental impact of any activity you do, and just make sure that they are just and fair, so we can make sure we're undertaking a just transition to a low carbon economy. So I'm just going to talk more on mitigation today, and actually you'll probably recognise a lot of these things here on my slide as ways that you can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. It's quite common knowledge at the moment. So what have we got here? Renewable energy, energy efficiency. We've also got sustainable travel, and also kind of the smart management of food and resources as well. So potentially local or regenerative food production, or reducing waste and reducing supply chain emissions within these areas. But there's no perfect way of doing these things, and it really does depend on a case-by-case basis what your work involves and kind of what the carbon hotspots are for you, and work that you might be able to do, or potentially work that you might be able to do that helps to inspire this change within society. So although I'm going to come on in a moment to talk about how you might think about measuring your carbon emissions, it's fair to say that if you can't do that, don't worry, you can still take action. It doesn't matter that much, just by making changes that will reduce emissions. So this graph, I thought I'd put it up here to give some inspiration. It's Scotland's carbon footprint in 2019, and it just shows the contribution of sources of carbon in Scotland. So it's interesting to see domestic transport's at the top there, and then we've got business and agriculture, so food and resources on my last slide, and then energy supply and so on. So reducing emissions from some of these areas is a great place to start. So how do you measure it? Well, measuring emissions can really be helpful if you kind of want to understand where your carbon hotspots are, or where to help you think about where you might prioritize action in your work or projects. And it also can help you to measure the success of any of your actions in a quantitative way. The greenhouse gas protocol, that's a great place to start for standards and guidance on how to measure emissions. And alongside this, we have emissions factors, and these can be local, or they can be global, or they can be national. So in the UK, we use the UK government emissions factors, and you can follow a link on my slide here to that spreadsheet. These factors are for 2021 at the moment, and they change every year. So what you're going to need is to use these factors is some data from your own work or project. So for instance, kilowatt hours that you might have used in electricity or other energy, liters of fuel you might have used, or mileage traveled, for instance, and they would be for measuring electricity, energy, fuel, vehicle emissions. Once you've got this data, and sometimes it can be quite easy to collect, so you can get it from your electricity bill, or you can get it from fuel receipts, for instance. All you have to do is use the emissions factor that you'll find in the spreadsheet, times it by that, and Bob's your uncle, you've got your kilograms of CO2e. And what CO2e is carbon dioxide equivalent. And all that means is just a measurement of all the gases associated with causing global warming. So it includes carbon dioxide and the other gases as well. So some things can be quite easy to measure, and it's certainly worth a look at the spreadsheet of emissions factors to see, what potential you have to measure your own emissions. In terms of where the sources of emissions that you might have, this diagram from the greenhouse gas protocol is really handy as well. What it does is it breaks it down into 3 scopes. So you've got scope 1 in the middle there. That's like direct emissions, so anything you directly own, so any fuel that you burn in vehicles or in buildings that you own yourself and you have direct control over. Then we've got scope 2, so that's purchasing of electricity from a supplier. And then scope 3 is also indirect, and these are kind of a bit more complex to measure. These are your sometimes called supply chain emissions. They can include anything that you purchase, anything you buy, any business travel, employee commuting, any emissions associated if you manufacture goods, for instance, with the use of those goods, the end of life of those goods, and yeah, basically anything you do to kind of carry out your activities. But don't panic, you don't have to measure every single one of these sources. First of all, you've got to set your boundaries. So you're going to choose the sources that are most relevant to you, and things that you have most control over. So, and for instance, in Historic Environment Scotland at the moment, for scope 3, we only measure waste and business travel, but we are looking to extend that. And Ewan did actually mention before that we did a study into the other sources of emissions, and what we found was actually visitor travel and purchase goods and services were some of our largest emitters. So definitely looking into expanding reporting in those areas. This is what the emissions factor spreadsheet looks like. Don't be intimidated, like honestly download it and have a look, and it's quite simple once you get your head around it. At the bottom you've got those tabs I've just circled. You can scroll along to find the emission source that you want to measure. This page, it shows you for UK electricity. I've circled at the top, you're looking for kilograms of CO2e. That's the emissions factor there that you then times by your kilowatt hours to get your carbon dioxide equivalent. So not too difficult. So as I said before, when you're looking at scope 3, it gets a bit trickier. So for instance, purchase goods and services, that can be a little bit more complicated. To measure emissions from goods that you buy, you have to understand their full life cycle. So that's what you can see here in my slide. And these kind of measurements can be done in life cycle assessments, or LCA. You can get that data from some databases, some are free, some are paid for, or otherwise you could ask if that product that you're buying has an environmental product declaration, which is becoming more common, but it's still quite rare, but it's definitely worth asking. Otherwise, if you can't measure it, again, don't worry. Just think of buying things that you know will reduce your emissions. So shortening your supply chains, buying local, buying products made of renewable energy, ones that are reused or remanufactured, so you don't have to keep buying them again and again, repairable, reusable, no packaging, for instance. These are all things that can help to reduce your footprint on their own. So support, where there are some really good places to get some support. So here there is actually a funding part that I've put here on my slide, specifically for community projects where you are reducing local emissions, and it's called the Climate Challenge Fund. And the projects can include maybe growing local food, reducing waste, sustainable transport, etc. Have a look on the website there on my slide, because it gives some great examples of some of the other projects that they've funded. And also guidance from HES, which maybe is more relevant for if you're working with buildings. We've got some really great guidance on micro renewables and fabric improvements for energy efficiency for buildings as well. So have a look on our website for those things. But I'm going to leave it there, hand it over to you. We're going to move on to the workshop now. Louise is going to come in, and we're going to think about ways that you might be able to take climate action in your own work. Thanks very much.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Katie. We're going to move on now to something a bit interactive, and hopefully that all works out okay. So I'm going to explain, before I kind of drop you in it, I'm going to explain what we're going to do. So we're going to use a Miro board, so that allows people to interact on there, and I'll run through what you can expect, and then also some things that you can do if you have some challenges before I share the link to let everyone have access to that. So just a second, I'll make sure it's coming up okay. The first thing that I'm going to do is share the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So in just a minute, I am going to share this link and it'll bring you to this board and you'll be able to see this. This is what you'll see when you first go in. And then what we're actually going, maybe, okay, here we go. What we're actually going to do is to look at some ideas that you might have to take climate action in whatever it is that you're working on, and then some of the challenges that you might be faced with that, and then some ideas that you or other people in the group have for solutions to that. And don't worry if you can't think of any solutions. I've been working on some of these things for a while, so hopefully I'll have some ideas for you. So I've popped some instructions there, but as I say, I'm going to run through it, but I will be there for you because I know that it can be a bit overwhelming for people. So everyone is going to come into this same board and we're just going to do it live. So just think about what you've heard already today. I'm sure you've got some really great ideas for some action that you could take, and you just want to grab one of these and then you can just edit that there and just type. I don't know, I was going to say something about we, but it's fine. So you can just type there and then you can click away from it. I'm going to take that away. And people will be able to see that live. So I would say if we can focus on the ideas section here for the first few minutes, and then we'll move on over to the challenges here, and then hopefully we'll move on to the solutions. So we can either do something that's kind of linear, so one idea, the challenge to that, and then the solutions to that, or talk a bit more broadly. And once we've got a few ideas up on the board here, I'll be asking people to share some thoughts that they have, so it's not just us all silently staring at a screen and writing. There'll be a bit of discussion happening at the same time. So I've got a couple of things to add to this. If you are joining from a phone or a tablet, you might have challenges connecting to this and being able to interact with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to share the screen of this. And Katie will keep an eye on the chat. So if you're not able to interact live, just pop any ideas that you have on the chat and Katie will transfer them over onto the board for everyone else to see. If that doesn't work for you, then just you can just kind of speak. I guess you can put your hands up and Katie will let you know instead of us all speaking over each other. I can see there is quite a few people on in the event today, but I think that we'll still manage with most people kind of typing a bit and then people having things to say. Okay, so before I finally share the link, just wanting to say, so this is a safe space for people to feel secure. So just say what you think. There might be stuff that works for you or is a good idea for something that you've been working on, but it won't be a good idea for someone else. So we're not going to tear people down. We need to try and be positive and think about ways to make things work in the circumstances that it'll work in, instead of just saying, oh, well, that wouldn't work for me. Okay, so hopefully that's covered everything. Before we move into this, does anyone have any questions? Oh, someone's already shared the link. Okay, so we can go into it now.
I think people are raring to go.
Okay, I can see some really good thoughts coming on here. If anyone has any ideas that they want to share, particularly if you've got an idea but you've also got a challenge to that, that would be really great. I can see that we're having a few challenges with the board. If you can try and just click on the post-its rather than anything else, because sometimes the board itself has just been moved again. And if you need any additional post-its, then you can just grab them over here at the sticky notes part. Okay, I can see there's some discussion about laminating signs, which I'm quite interested in, and that some people are saying that they can't. The challenge to that is that people are not used to it. Personally, I kind of feel like just because something's the way it is, that's not a good enough reason to keep doing it. But sometimes you have to work through a process of how you can how you change it instead of just making the change. But I would say that sometimes laminating things is the best way to preserve a sign. So if it's going to be in an area where it might get wet, then that might be the best option that we have for now. But yeah, if the challenge is that people won't listen to it otherwise, I would say that's just about communicating to people that it's going to happen, particularly for people that are regularly, wherever that is. Obviously, it depends on the circumstances. Okay, I'm gonna invite someone to kind of shout out and say, share something that they've written. So if we have any volunteers.
I had quite a boring one about skills audits in terms of, I think there's a lot of, I'm just wondering if organisations feel confident that they have the skills in-house to make these changes. But by doing a skills audit, you can get that baseline information and then potentially look at what partnerships you might need or people or help you might need to try and make those informed changes.
Yeah, that's great. So that's more a challenge and then a solution that you've suggested there, which is amazing. I love it. So yeah, of course, kind of auditing where you are with what people already know, and then seeing where you can bring people in, and to complement that might, you said already, kind of making partnerships, but there might be things where you don't have someone with something, but in the first instance there's a resource there where someone can learn a little bit of it to get the ball rolling, and then kind of develop a partnership or bring someone else in, obviously depending on what it is that you're talking about.
I think it's Rosie here.
Hi.
It's quite interesting to see there's a few post-its that reference the use of renewable energy, which of course is something which is, you know, one of the pillars. But obviously at the moment there's a lot about the gas and the electricity crisis and the costs of that, and the reality of even trying to move to a provider who has green energy is still a cost. And I suppose it's the challenges and solutions, thinking about what's the appetite going to be for lobbying to make it more accessible in terms of you know, green renewable and energy and such like, in the costs, and will there be a focus there? You know, things like solar panels, for example, we're trying to install those in our house, and a lot of the grants and such like have closed at a time where actually they're needed more than ever. And I suppose it's what will be the collective voice on that won't get lost underneath the debate and the challenge around gas and electricity production. So I suppose, sorry, that's not really an idea of a solution. It's more just an observation of a bit of a common theme coming out here.
Yeah, basically I agree with you. I don't really have anything else to add. I've been watching some of this unfold and had similar thoughts. I am optimistic that the increase in gas and electricity prices might prompt people to have a look at other options, even if it doesn't save them, if it's already costing them a lot of money. But I think you're right, there's a bigger picture kind of conversation to be had there, which, while interesting and really important, I'm not sure that we can devote enough sort of time and energy to today. But that's basically a challenge to quite a lot of these ideas that we have here, even if we don't have a full solution. I think there is, though, still some funding opportunities available to that. Let me check this. Let me check that after this meeting, and I can forward that over to you, Rosie.
Can I just come in on that point, Louise and Rosie? In HES, we've had a carbon reduction program, as I sort of briefly spoke about earlier, and we have not gone down the road of renewable energy yet, because we've solely focused on energy efficiency through insulation, through installing more efficient equipment, through behavioral change, etc. And some of the figures we've got are amazing. And I'd give a quote of, I think 48% carbon reduction at Edinburgh Castle. And that's through several years of just chipping away at gradual improvements to the building fabric. And obviously that's quite a sensitive building to be doing it in, but if we can do it there, we can do it anywhere. And the energy that Edinburgh Castle uses, it's obviously a big place. It's equivalent to, think about 280 houses. It's like a small village effectively. And we've not even got to the stage yet of installing renewable energy. So my point is really there's a heck of a lot you can do just in terms of improving efficiency. And our model is to do that until we kind of pick off all the low-hanging fruit, as it were, and then we think about alternative forms of energy through renewables. So energy efficiency is a really effective and cost-effective way of doing it. Certainly at Edinburgh Castle, we've invested quite a lot of money, but it all paid back within 5 years in terms of what we saved on the utility bills.
Just to add to that, Ewan, the grid as well is getting greener. So those emissions factors that Katie was talking about, that's improving every year. So that's a kind of complement to looking at your own kind of area and making things more efficient, is that yeah, they'll have less emissions just by the fact that, you know, the whole country is kind of transitioning over to being more efficient and some more renewable sources as well. Okay, let me see.
Can I make a point? It's Pamela here.
Yeah, of course.
Really interesting to see about leadership and about involving the team and all that kind of thing. It's quite interesting within a local authority context, because our sustainability section has really taken a lead and has got councillors, you know, well informed in making strong strategic decisions. That does impact on some of the operations on different services, and that's a little chink and a gap that's not been filled. And I can understand that they need to approach the, you know, improvements and developments in that way. They've got to like tie down what the council are going to commit to. However, it means then that when they're then communicating best practice or targets for services, a lot of people, especially on the front line, don't know what that's been decided, that they've not been involved in the wider conversation. And so that just makes that integration and moving forward slightly difficult, because obviously people are working and approaching at it at different stages. So that's my experience anyway. And it's never great to feel that you're playing catch up, but obviously I also understand that changes need to be made, and it's got to start from somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds like it might be a communication challenge. And
well, within the
also
council, within the local authorities, communication is always difficult, and these are complicated, complex issues. And I can imagine that's the same even when you're dealing with a small heritage asset or volunteer run. You know, some people are going to get it, some people are going to know, other people won't be part of that conversation, and it is an important conversation. So I can appreciate that that piece of work involving the team is actually a fairly extensive piece of work in its own right.
Yeah, I was just going to give an example. So there's the kind of challenge of making sure everyone finds out something once something's been decided and is ready to be implemented, or will be in a few weeks or months. But something that we've done is really taking people along on the journey. So if we're starting to develop a new piece of guidance or whatever, telling people that we're doing that, and then at certain points giving people opportunities to feed into that, so that we can identify where there might be particular challenges for different teams or different roles. And obviously I don't know what your role is and whether you've got the ability to kind of make those suggestions, but certainly I think sometimes having too many people in the room making the decisions is a problem, but having an opportunity for some feedback that informs those decisions can be really, really powerful, and it can bring people along this journey and make it easier to implement when that happens. I don't know if that's remotely helpful, because I realise that local authorities are these kind of big, sprawling organisations. I saw a comment and now I can't find it that I really liked. Oh yeah, this one. So it says, being green is not just one person's responsibility in the organisation. And I see that someone has put that as a challenge, but I would say that it is a challenge, because I think if it is just if it's seen as one person's responsibility, that's a challenge. But I think the messaging around that is a solution. So if you get the messaging right on that one, then it can be the solution and help you with other ideas. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to pop it over on the solution side as well, because I like that.
I'm just going to jump in and say it's looking brilliant. There's so much on the board. It's absolutely fantastic. And if you have got any ideas for solutions that you might see to some of the challenges, because that's all filling up as well, then add it in and draw a line to it if you can. Kind of helping each other. It's amazing. Really great to see.
Is there a way we might be able to share this afterwards, even if it's just a screenshot? Or I know probably some people will be really interested to look at this in their leisure to make sure that they're capturing a lot of the points. Is there maybe even just a PDF we can share later?
Yeah, well, I thought we could keep the board open for a day or two afterwards, because people might have more ideas that they want to add, and then people might have documents or something that they can add, that case studies or something that they've done before, so you can pop the link on that, but I realize that's not as easy to do kind of live. So then we can share it with everyone afterwards with all that information, so people can go back to that. Katie, if we want to share it kind of longer term, will it still say live?
Yeah, it can do, yeah, or I can just export it as a PDF and send it around.
Okay, great.
I'm a big fan of stick-its, but there's so many there. I know I'm missing like points and stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to be coming back and having a look at it.
Should we read out some of the ideas just now?
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at them. Oh, I really like this one, and the ideas is training for organisations to get everyone on board and dispel climate myths. Yeah, I think people hear a lot of different things, and it's hard to kind of figure out what's true and also what's sort of true in terms of the whole country or the whole world, and then something slightly different might apply more locally. I don't know if anyone had any challenges that was for that. And if not, I'll just move on and read something else. Oh, I like this one, is keep running events as online as well as in person post-COVID to minimise travel emissions. And the reason that I like that is because it has another benefit, that other challenge that we were just talking about people not being taken along on the journey and people just handing something, people having something handed to them as completed. Keeping things online gives more people the opportunity to interact as well, so it makes it a bit more accessible for people that maybe would have to travel a bit further or have commitments that mean that they can't join. So I like that one. This one here, grow food on heritage sites, which creates community engagement. I wonder if anyone in the call has any experience of that, and whether they've successfully done it or they've come across any challenges.
Hi, folks, it's Pamela again. Not necessarily growing food, but I am going to submit a bid to get some funding to kind of generate a bit of activity around tatties and tatty growing in South Ayrshire. So that is based on a kind of intangible heritage blog that I wrote. So it's definitely using heritage to get people growing. So I think what I said earlier on in the chat, we've all got brilliant heritage-based assets, whether they're intangible or material. We've all got a great amount of skills and interpreting and education. You know, Katie from Stromness, she's got super skills in communicating ideas. This is just another theme that we can also kind of use to apply our collections and skills to. So I think it's definitely something we should all be kind of thinking about and looking at, if that's any help.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I'm aware of a few of my colleagues that are kind of exploring that right now, but I don't know where they've got with that. Okay, I'm moving over to some of these challenges now. I like this one that says linked to social justice. If people are living in poverty, they're less likely to put in energy into their climate impacts. And while that's true, I would counter that to say there are also people that personally have a low impacts because they're typically not doing a lot of the things that have the highest emissions anyway. So I think reframing that can be quite helpful. But bearing that in mind is definitely important when we're talking to people. So we can kind of say, you know, this is about doing the things that you're able to do rather than making everyone feel like they have to do things that is out with their control. And there's a few others that touch on that. Someone here saying cycling to work is not an option when you live 20 miles away from the nearest town and you have things you need to take to work. I think that's a good example of we need to be you know, there might be someone else working that their cycle would be just, you know, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So it's about looking at the things that are best for different circumstances.
Louise, I just come in to pick up a point about challenges and solutions, and looking at local produce and such, like in localities. On the 5th of November, we're running a Make Your Mark event for volunteer managers, and part of that's going to be involving volunteers in activities around sustainability and the environment, and facilitating volunteers learning around climate change. So if anybody's interested in that, I'm going to pop a wee link in the chat, because it explores some of the challenges we've been talking about through this workshop.
And Rosie, is that the one that they're going to do another version of this workshop?
Yes.
But that's not to put people off. That just means that there might be some different people, and having different presentations at the start will like throw up different ideas that can be put on there. So I would see those as like a complement to each other, rather than you've done one so you don't need to do the other. And just to say that this activity is really good for getting these ideas, as you can see. So when we share that PDF, then feel free to use a version of this with your own community or team that you're working on, because it might be that you can kind of work through, you know, ideas that you have, and then challenges, and then the solutions, and that can be a really good way of taking things forward and identifying ideas that you might not even know were opportunities for you.
Brilliant. I'm so distracting in a way, isn't it, watching Miro boards sort of being created, and they're like works of art. And I think, like you, Louise, I'm just amazed at how many points we've got down here, and I can't wait to have a proper look at them. Do you think that's a good space, a good time to maybe move on to the next presentation, and then people can have a look at this maybe after the event? And does that sound? I just want to thank Louise and Katie for that fabulous 40 minutes there. I've learned so much. I've got so many links open now that I intend to go back and share with colleagues as well, to sort of look at what we can do internally within our organisation that we're not doing already to look at these themes. So thank you both for your time with that. That was fantastic. We're going to move on to 1 Minute Mayhem. And I'm going to hand over to fabulous Eve Boyle, who curates this element of the event.
Thank you, Cara, and hello again, everybody. Regular viewers will know what the form is here, but for those of you who are new to SCHC, welcome again. And just to explain, this is our 60-second soapbox opportunity. You can get up and talk for 1 minute, not more than 1 minute, about anything heritage related that you want to share with us. I will time your 60 seconds on my phone, and when time's up, I will ring a bell. Can we hear that? Yes? Okay, great. Right, onwards. We have 5 presentations booked in this afternoon, it is now. But there might be time at the end if anybody wants to step up from the floor. So raise your hand, and I'll leave it to the chair to decide whether we've got time for any more, but hopefully. So first up, we have, we'd like to welcome Sheila Asante from Museums Galleries Scotland, who is going to talk to us about empire, slavery, and Scotland's museums. Do we have a slide up for? We do. And is Sheila there? Are you there, Sheila? Can you unmute yourself, step forward?
I am here, I am here.
Brilliant. Okay, Sheila, then tell us something about empire, slavery, and Scotland's museums in just a minute, beginning now.
Empire, Slavery, and Scotland's Museums is a nationwide project that's currently taking place. The project is exploring the ways Scottish museums can help empower people to explore Scotland's connections with empire, historic slavery, and racism. The project gives people across the country the opportunity to shape Scotland's museums. This project is sponsored by Scottish Government and overseen by an independent steering group, which are representative of relevant experience and community interests and diverse in their membership. The national consultation is part of a wider research profile of Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museums project. The project's recommendations will ensure that Scotland's historical and contemporary connections with slavery, empire and racism are integral to the stories that museum audiences discover. This project is important to Scotland's expanding and deepening its understanding of history in all its complexity, and we hope that you will take the survey and feel free to share with your family and friends. And we look forward to hearing your views on how these important histories can be explored. And I'll put a link in.
Time's up. Link going in the chat. Yes, thank you very much. That was that was great. So thank you, Sheila. Next up, we have Audrey Wilson from the Scottish Council and Archives. Now, Audrey, of course, is one of the organisers of our conversations, and regular attenders will know Audrey well. Now, Audrey would like to tell us. What would you like to tell us? I'm just doing that. Audrey would like to. Audrey would like us to join a real live in the flesh conference to be held in Glasgow next month. Audrey, are we there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah. Audrey, ready? Ready?
Be kind, Eve.
Ready? Go.
Okay, so I'm Audrey Wilson and I am the Partnership and Engagement Manager at Scottish Council and Archives. And we represent the archive sector in Scotland, including, most importantly, archives of community heritage groups. These groups, often entirely run by volunteers, need our support and have a very important role in today's society. On the 10th of November, the Community Archives Heritage Group Network is having their first conference in Glasgow during COP26. Keeping in line with the theme of climate change, our conference theme is Sustainable Stories, Capturing an Age of Change in Community Archives. We have an exciting one-day programme with PowerPoint presentations in the main hall, 2 breakout workshops, a poster session, and a row of display stands that is going to be available all day. If you can't make the conference in person, you can join us from the comfort of your own home. The main presentations will be live streamed, and the link to Eventbrite will be put in the chat room. See you there.
Oh. What timing, what timing. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So there we are. Now we welcome Karen Brown of the University of St Andrews. Karen is also one of the founders of the Scottish Community Heritage Alliance, who are partners in these conversations. Now, Karen wants to offer us some reflections on her current research project, which is based in the Hebridean Islands. Karen, you're...
Can you hear me?
Yep, if I just have to reset my timer.
That's fine.
And so, Karen, your time starts now.
Thanks, Eve. Delighted to be here for this characteristically positive and forward-looking forum. Thank you. As several people here know, I work closely with community heritage organisations, not only in Scotland, but also Latin America and the Caribbean. And in these contexts, the questions of global warming and climate justice are urgently at the forefront of both civic and political agendas. It's well known that particularly for Indigenous and low resource countries, the impacts of climate change are the most pressing, and yet these communities have often contributed the least to carbon emissions. On the other hand, there's an increased global awareness of and interest in learning from Indigenous and traditional knowledge for understanding ecologically minded and ethical approaches to humankind's relationship with the planet and with their worldviews. In our national context, we've just heard the science about how global warming will affect us. If there will be increased opportunities going forwards, then just as in the Global South, we will look to our past for Indigenous and traditional practices at community heritage locations. Thank you.
Oh, it's always good fun stopping people, you know, if you overrun. But thank you, Karen. Thank you very much for that. Next, we have Rosie Wiley, who is a practiced 1 minute mayhem offerer, whatever the word is. Rosie is Community Engagement Manager at HES and well known to most of you as one of the organisers of our conversations. And today, Rosie wants to draw our attention to the opportunities for community-led events at HES properties. Take it away, Rosie.
Lovely, thank you, Eve. I will assume that you can see my screen right now. So did you know that you can hold a community event at Historic Environment Scotland Property and Care? We've got over 330 sites in our care and welcome community event applications that are not for profit and will be run by the community for the community. Example sites, you might want to host an event: the Borders Abbeys, Craigmillar Castle, St Andrews Castle, Innerpeffray Chapel, Duff House, Fort Charlotte, the list goes on. And this is where you can find information on our communities pages. I will share a link at Communities in Properties in Care. But have you looked at the Museum and Galleries Scotland, what is it called? Scotland's Year of Stories 2022 Community Stories Fund. Have a look at that, because perhaps that could support you delivering an event next year at Scotland's Year of Stories at one of our properties. Thank you.
No, you finished. You get 8 seconds left.
Oh, 8 seconds, right. Okay, quickly, look at this.
We
Make
dance.
Your Mark green volunteering event as well. I'd mentioned that. That's on the 5th of November. Come along if you're interested in involving volunteers in green activity. Thank you.
That's enough from you. Thank you very much. Lastly, we have Pamela McIntyre, who was joining in the conversation earlier on. Pamela from South Ayrshire Council, as our topic is Rising Water, using fine art collections to connect and support South Ayrshire's coastal communities. Now, Pamela will have a video running, this video up here, as she speaks. Now, the video is 2.5 minutes long, so there won't be time to show it all, but we will put the link for it onto the chat, okay? So, Pamela, if you're there.
Hi.
Tell us something about Rising Waters, starting now.
Okay, so in March 2020, we were preparing a physical exhibition of the Council's fine art collections, which obviously relate to our coast and waters. We had to go online and this became a digital exhibition. And in July, we decided to put it up physically. And at that point, I realized we could actually include a lot of climate facts and information relating to adaptation and also how coastal communities are dealing with increased visitors and littering, rubbish and toileting. So we applied to the HES SCHC MGS 26 hashtag COP26 Conversations Fund, and we're launching a photo opportunity down the beaches on the 13th and 14th of November. And we're going to convey how we can use the collection to have proper conversations with coastal communities, creating a digital resource which will connect visitors and people to our climate and adaptation changes. So it's a really longer term project.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pamela. I'll put that link up in just 2 seconds, okay? Are there any more takers for 1 minute mayhem? No? Any hands up? Cara, can you see any?
I cannot see any hands up.
Right. Oh, well, okay. In that case, that concludes that for this month. See you next month.
Thanks so much to everyone and to Eve for just always doing a fabulous job for managing that area of the event. We've got 15-20 minutes or so, we can maybe overrun a little bit, to sort of have a discussion on some of the themes that we've heard today, some of the talks and the case studies, and so it's a real opportunity for you to sort of sit up, take part, speak up with your thoughts on what you've seen today. A reminder that if you could put up your digital hand when you'd like to speak, we'd be very grateful. And also, please do put any comments or questions in the chat as well. We will try and pick that up. And just a quick reminder, just to be kind and polite and cheerful and lovely, basically, when we're talking to each other during this conversation, if that's okay. I'm going to jump in with a question, actually, with Kate for Katie at Stromness, I was just thinking or reflecting on some of the fabulous partnerships that you've had, that you created to input into that exhibition, and I just wondered if do you feel that's easier for you to do it because of your geographical location? Like, would you have been able to do that as easily, say, in the Central Belt or something like that? And therefore, is that a really big advantage of when you're undertaking work like this, when you're in more local, more rural communities, is it easier to sort of identify those partnerships?
That's a really interesting one, and I was sort of trying to think about that as well when I was thinking about, because obviously I have lived down south, and to be honest, I think you're probably right, because I was thinking back to how you know, how I know people, and I know them through like my sports club or school friends, or you know, one of my old teachers was in the sub-aqua club, so he's the first person I contacted to say, can you let the sub-aqua club know about all this? So I don't know, I don't know if it's, maybe if you've stayed in an area for a longer time and you've got like, you're already in, it's your own community. I think that's the difference between me when I worked in Dunfermline, for example. You know, I got to know a lot of people, but it wasn't my community. I didn't actually live there, you know. So this is my community. I grew up within 5 minutes drive of the museum. So I think it does make a difference if it's, you know, if you're actually living and working in that community, you know, then I think it does make a big difference to how you can make those partnerships.
But I see that as a big advantage, that, and when we're talking about activism or action, you know, and utilising community heritage in this way, those local links and that being embedded within that local community, and that's a real advantage. And I kind of feel like your paper and your case study, your exhibition can help inspire projects throughout the UK, and it's like down to that, just I think down to those partnerships and the other sectors that you worked with to have input into that exhibition, I think is really extraordinary, and it's a framework or a method that should be looked at elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, it might be the fact, you know, everybody does pretty much know everybody, so you know, somebody will say, oh well, so and so, he works at Sula Diving, you know, go and see if he's got any, you know. So I think yeah, it's maybe harder to do in a bigger place, but then these networks, you know, in archaeology everybody knows everybody, and maybe in natural heritage in Edinburgh, for instance, like Rosie will know, me and Rosie worked at the Ranger Service, there's a network of organisations around Holyrood Park that have connections with each other, so it's maybe kind of infiltrating and you know, asking about within these groups to see who knows who.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering that and talking through. Rosie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's another question for Katie. You talked about snorkeling to record wildlife, and I think we probably all instantly just wished we lived up with you and could come snorkeling with you, because just what a wonderful thing for us all to visualize. Is that a role that you do as a volunteer? Is it open to others in the context? Do you think that there's going to be a growth in the interest of marine-related volunteering in response to climate impact? Sorry, because I think it's a really interesting topic that a lot of people would find appealing, but it's possibly not very accessible because obviously there's very specific skills, safety requirements, etc.
Yeah, I think as well as the climate impacting on that, or the sort of raised awareness of climate change, I think one of the big drivers of wild swimming and snorkeling has been COVID lockdown, and that's why I got into it, because as most people who know me know, I play underwater hockey and I can't do that in lockdown, so I had to think of another way of getting in underwater time, and that's kind of, you know, combined with the Living Wrecks exhibition is how I ended up starting snorkeling. And yes, the Sea Search is done as a volunteer, and anyone who's interested, you can go on their website and you can find out about their observer courses and find out how you can get involved. But in terms of archaeology, I've sort of been mulling over the idea about going out snorkeling to look for some underwater archaeology that I know is within safe snorkeling depths, and doing some recording of archaeological sites underwater as well. So yeah, accessibility is one thing, and luckily when we did the snorkel safari, I contracted in the local dive school to run it, so they did all the health and safety and insurance and everything, and that's why I snorkel as a free agent. Nothing, you know, I go out and I don't have a club, I just do it as with my friends. So there are those sort of things to consider, but I think it's opened another world to me, and it can be done all around Scotland. It's not just Orkney. I mean, I see lots of people doing it on the west coast and even around Edinburgh and Fife. So yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned there about lockdown and the impact that's had on not only people's activities, because obviously wild swimming has gone like crazy during, I think, in the last 18 months. Also, I mean, I'm reflecting on myself. We're a one-car family, and I've only been to the petrol station twice since March 2020, because we've just not, and I'm fortunate, I live in Edinburgh, so, you know, we can walk, we can take public transport, but it has dramatically, just the way our lives have changed over the last 18 months, has dramatically reduced our car use, because we've just walked, or just recently we've started taking more buses, I guess. So if we're both working at home and our lives have changed, I don't know, it's an unintentional decrease, but it's there nonetheless. So I think that'd be really interesting theme to explore as well. Have we got any other questions? I've got a question for Sue, but I don't want to just hog the floor with my thoughts. I'll crack on, Sue. I was really obviously you were saying that sort of climate change is part of the project, but it's more about as you say, sort of preserving, or sort of your stewardship role of the caves, and trying to safeguard the caves for the future, and climate reacting to the changing coast is part of that. But I just wondered if you thought that climate action will start to feed more into your activities, and whether that's in your engagement activities, your education activities, or do you feel it's at the right level now? Do you feel we're on a verge of change with some community projects?
I think that there's opportunity to do more in that respect, because as the threat to the caves becomes ever more real, that obviously goes hand in hand with the threat to us all. And you can't tackle the one without tackling the other, really. So I don't see that we can avoid, I wouldn't want to avoid getting more involved in things that are going to address the climate problem. It helps us in the long run, and obviously it helps every one of us. So I think there is opportunity to do something in that direction. I'm not sure that everybody in the society will be on board with that. I think most would, but there are some older people who perhaps are not so convinced of the problems that this is going to cause and that. So yeah, it will be interesting times, I think, moving forward. But I really think nobody can just stand by and watch this happen. We've got to make a contribution in any way we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for that perspective. Have we got any other questions? Again, I've got one more for Tanya. Tanya, are you still here? I think you are.
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hi, Tanya. I don't know if you're at the right stage of the project to answer this question, but and it's fine if you're not, you'll have to come back and talk about it. But I suppose making that link between the process of doing, building the turf building, and also potentially retaining carbon within the built structure. And do you feel that can help inform archaeological practice in terms of the process of doing archaeology, or do you know anyone else who's sort of looking at work like that? So yeah.
Yeah, very good questions. Yeah, so the project came from archaeological research by trying to understand how turf building worked in the past, where we know this impact has happened. People have built in turf, and that goes back to the Neolithic, and especially in Scotland. So trying to quantify these impacts that happened in the past, and then understanding this in past environments as well, and also how this ties in to wider agricultural circles. So if we are stripping the ground, for example, for agriculture, people in the past were creating new fields, then that turf is not wasted. It seems to have gone into the building, and they then lived in this building. These turf walls got enriched with nutrients from the cooking, from having animals in there, dung, urine. So you're creating a really rich compost resource, which you can then collapse, plow over and plant again. And at the same time, you're also planting the area where you've been farming. So that was the inspiration to understand from the past how these things are all connected, and how a negative impact on one side can turn into a longer term positive impact, and taking these longer term perspectives. So this is how we then try to model this into the present day. And as you will have seen from Hannah's presentation, we had to use some of the machinery for health and safety issues as well, but also being open about where issues are, and then quantifying these negative impacts, and then seeing how can we make this better. And that's why we, for example, tried hand cutting or feed cutting versus turf cutting. And interestingly, for example, if you're cutting yourself, you're going deeper into the subsoil, and therefore also releasing more carbon, whereas it seems if you're using a flatter cut, you're leaving much more of the rhizomen in there, the roots, and can encourage a quicker growth. So it's all these aspects, so many things when you start thinking about it. And I can see how that can work for archaeological projects as well, where we also have to strip often the ground in order to get to the archaeology, and we need to be aware, and there's good comment here in the chat as well, need to be aware that this is a climate impact, a carbon release. And if we have it, how can we offset it? These are impacts that are happening. How can we do this? One way is more remote sensing, more remote techniques, perhaps thinking about trench sizes, but also can we use the turf that we have stripped from site in a creative way? For example, like the idea of the tati planting or food growing on archaeological sites. Yeah, it's this creative thinking where we all can play a part and be involved. So yeah, and we're very happy to talk more about the project. We're really at the beginning, but it was a great opportunity to share here what we're doing, and hearing from you as well, what else can be done. So thank you very much for all the feedback.
No, brilliant. So we'll definitely have to have you back, I think, to talk. Eve, you've got a point.
Well, it was just really slightly challenging what Tanya was saying, that back in the 18th century, we know that there were objections to people building in turf because it wasn't seen as a beneficial thing. To a lot of landowners, go back, first of all, in the 1990s, Ross Noble, when he built his first turf house at the Newton Moor Highland Folk Museum, he recorded that it took half an acre of turf, and that was used up in its construction. And that's not just thin divots, but as you say, turf with a lot of roots and soil in that. And back in the 18th century, there were references or complaints being made by landowners about how much topsoil was being locked up in buildings. You know, if you've got half an acre per building and you've got 10 buildings in a settlement, that's a lot of soil that's not growing crops. So there are issues there. But using the roots, you talked about just taking the top of the turf off. In Iceland, as you probably know, all the turf building work that's going on there emphasizes the importance of having a good root structure in your turf blocks in order to have a stable wall. And they're building walls that are 2-3 meters high. So they've got to stand up. There's the issues there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's this is really fascinating how it all interlinks, how one positive aspect has a negative impact, how we need to think about it from a construction point of view, from an environmental point of view. And it's interesting speaking to colleagues as well from you who are involved in agriculture and growing from that side, how it's important to air your pasture, and that turf cutting is sometimes a practice to remove old grass that has compacted too much and starts to waterlog and get wet. So there's these known cycles from Wales, I think, where there's this practice of 7-year regeneration of pastures, where one could arguably say it ties into a turf building cycle. So there's a lot going on and a lot happening in this kind of connection, where the examples I was talking of were especially from prehistoric cyclical economies, where it seems to work because maybe the lives of houses were considered differently, and you would just take your house down and compost it. But we also have historical records of tenancies that lasted 7 years or 10 years, and then people were moved on, for example, and again turf was used for their houses. So I think, yeah, there's so much more that we need to think about and consider, and therefore thank you very much. And if you have any more suggestions, I think I put my email address in the chat as well, so please do get in touch, because these are really complex issues, and the more we hear of these impacts, the better. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, both, I think, for that really interesting exchange of knowledge there. And also, I think, really emphasising how much looking to the past basically can, looking at archaeological evidence and historical evidence and seeing potential solutions or potential answers there as well. So I think, for me, this whole event, well, it has just really showed, emphasised how important community heritage and heritage in general is at sort of looking at climate action and informing climate action. But I'm going to hand over to my conference colleague, Rosie, who's going to sort of give a sum up of today and highlight some of the key points that she's perhaps felt throughout the session. So over to you, Rosie.
Sure, thank you, Cara. Conscious as well that I am standing between everybody and their lunch, so I will keep this brief. So in terms of a bit of a summary, really climate change being brought to our attention over the past few years, of course, but COP26 has really accelerated awareness, and we need to work together to embrace the shifts in behaviours that affect us all. We need to embrace these shifts in different ways, respect and support each other with our differing needs and skills. There's a real opportunity to turn community heritage responses into one of the solutions. As everyone said, projects are finding that funding applications are welcome related to the addressing the climate impact. So let's really strike while the iron's hot. It's not a coincidence that collaboration was a core theme throughout all presentations today. Both rural and urban communities have a responsibility to embrace an action-orientated response. Neither should make assumptions on the other, but think creatively together. There's a very big complex picture that we're learning about, and it's been talked about quite a lot of detail, really. For example, of all land management considerations being taken into account, so that one activity does not by default impact on another. They need to be modelled to be as long-term positive impacts, such as regenerative agriculture, as we've just been talking about. An important takeaway and reflection that we can all make, many activities we engage with through community heritage either are or can become interlinked with project planning to mitigate climate impact. So many can be achieved locally. Sue talked about improving accessibility to include increase visitors and increase contributions to the local economy, showing that the Weems project is building wider community resilience in the face of climate action. Edinburgh University researching the past to help the future, construction practices and methods, and learning from the past to help the future. Katie talked about volunteering being part of a solution, which in turn brings many benefits of volunteering at both an individual and community level. So there's so much we can be thinking about. And some inspiration from Katie and Louise that I really liked. Very simple messages. Reduce energy, use renewable energy, save water, use local projects, encourage low carbon travel, always talk about it and challenge people, use reused or waste materials, reduce waste, reduce plastics, spread the word, and lastly, ditch disposables. So that was my quick summary, I think, of today. And I'll pass back over to Cara to very quickly tell us about the next event.
So much, Rosie. There's no way I would have been that succinct, summing up all of these big themes. So that's just brilliant. So as Rosie's alluded to, our next event is on Saturday, the 13th of November, which will really celebrate community heritage. It's our traditional second weekend of November. For the Community Heritage Conference, Community Heritage Conversations. So if you've got an example or of a project or a case study that you want to highlight, please do get in touch with us, because we've got an open programme at the moment. So it's definitely a free-for-all if you'd like your to talk about your project. We'd also love your input for the content of future events. So again, if you've got an idea or a theme that you think we should be discussing, then again, please do get in touch. I want to thank everyone who has made today happen, our incredible speakers, Ewan, Sue, Katie, Hannah, Tanya, Katie and Louise, our incredible BSL interpreters, Heather and Stephen, and my fellow Community Heritage Organising Committee, Eve, Rosie, Martin, Becca, Gavin, Catherine, Audrey, Neil, Fernanda, and our tech extraordinaire, Tessa. And I'm sorry if I've missed anyone off there, but it takes so many people to make this event, but we all love it, and we all love seeing you each and every month or every 6 weeks to discuss these themes. So thank you. Go have a fabulous lunch, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.